A barista mocked a simple woman's basic coffee order, calling it embarrassing and suggesting she didn't belong in their upscale establishment. What he didn't know was that she owned the entire chain. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who choose to blend in, and Marcus Chen was about to learn why you should never judge someone by their order. The morning rush at Artisan Grounds had reached its peak, steam hissing from industrial espresso machines, while the scent of freshly ground beans filled the converted warehouse space. Exposed brick walls displayed awards and certifications in sleek frames, while customers in tailored suits and designer athleisure clutched their phones, scrolling through emails as they waited for their complex, personalized beverages. Behind the polished concrete counter, Marcus Chen moved with practiced arrogance, his black apron pristine despite the chaos around him. At 26, he'd cultivated an image of coffee sophistication that impressed the tech executives and marketing directors who frequented this flagship location. His knowledge of bean origins, brewing temperatures, and milk foam artistry had earned him a reputation as the city's most skilled barista, a title he wore like armor against anyone who might question his expertise. The espresso machine gleamed under the industrial lighting as Marcus finished crafting a cortado with precision, his movements deliberate and showy. He'd mastered the theater of coffee preparation, understanding that half his tips came from customers who wanted to feel they were witnessing artistry, not just service. The morning crowd appreciated complexity, ordering drinks with modifications that required genuine skill to execute properly. Double ristretto shots, oat milk heated to exactly 140 degrees, Madagascar vanilla syrup, and foam art that resembled actual recognizable shapes. These were his people. Customers who understood that great coffee was an experience, not just caffeine delivery. Elena Rodriguez pushed through the heavy glass doors at exactly 9:15. Her timing deliberate but appearing coincidental. She'd learned years ago that the best way to understand your business was to experience it as your customers did, without the artificial politeness that came with recognition. At 52, she'd built a coffee empire from a single cart outside a university library. But success hadn't changed her fundamental approach to the world. She preferred comfortable clothes over designer labels, practical shoes over fashion statements, and simple pleasures over complicated displays of wealth. Her appearance today was carefully unremarkable. Faded jeans that had been washed countless times, a navy sweater with a small hole near the left elbow, and white sneakers that showed honest wear. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a worn leather purse that had traveled with her for over a decade. To anyone observing, she looked like a middle-aged woman who might work in a nearby office building, perhaps an administrator or bookkeeper who'd stopped by for her daily caffeine fix before facing another day of routine responsibilities. The line moved slowly, giving Elena time to observe the dynamics she'd built but rarely witnessed firsthand. Customers ahead of her ordered elaborate creations, with the confidence of people accustomed to having their preferences accommodated. A woman in a tailored blazer requested a macchiato with half-pump vanilla and coconut milk, specifying the foam density she preferred. A young man in expensive sneakers asked for a flat white with an extra shot, made with beans from a specific Ethiopian region. Each order was met with enthusiastic professionalism from Marcus, who clearly enjoyed demonstrating his expertise to an appreciative audience. Elena had built this culture intentionally, training her staff to treat coffee preparation as a craft worthy of respect and study. She'd invested in the best equipment, sourced premium beans from sustainable farms, and created an environment where baristas could take pride in their skills. The goal had been to elevate the entire experience, making each cup something special rather than merely functional. Watching Marcus work, she felt a mixture of pride and concern. His technical ability was undeniable, but something in his demeanor suggested that pride in craft had evolved into something less admirable. When Elena reached the counter, Marcus barely glanced up from the register, his attention already focused on the more interesting challenge of the next complex order. The morning rush was hitting its stride, and he had little patience for what he assumed would be another simple transaction from someone who clearly didn't understand what this establishment represented. "What can I get you?" he asked, his tone professional but distant, fingers already hovering over the touchscreen register with practiced efficiency. Elena smiled gently, the expression reaching her eyes in a way that spoke of genuine warmth rather than customer service training. "I'd like a medium coffee, please." "Just regular coffee." Marcus paused, his fingers stopping their dance over the screen. He looked at her properly for the first time, taking in her unremarkable appearance and simple request. Around them, the sounds of the coffee shop continued, steam wands hissing and grinders operating. But something in the air had shifted almost imperceptibly. "Regular coffee?" Marcus repeated, his voice carrying a note of confusion that bordered on disbelief. "You mean like drip coffee?" "Yes, that would be perfect," Elena replied, maintaining her pleasant demeanor despite the slight change in Marcus's tone. Marcus glanced around the shop, perhaps checking to see if other customers were witnessing this unusual request. The espresso machines dominated the counter space, their chrome surfaces reflecting the industrial lighting overhead. In the corner, a single drip coffee setup looked almost forgotten, like a relic from a simpler time when coffee shops served coffee instead of crafted experiences. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice taking on the patient tone typically reserved for explaining complicated concepts to confused customers. "This is Artisan Grounds. We specialize in craft coffee experiences. Maybe you're looking for something more sophisticated? I could recommend an Americano, which is similar to drip coffee, but made with our signature espresso blend." Elena's expression remained unchanged, though something flickered behind her eyes that a more observant person might have recognized as amusement rather than confusion. "I appreciate the suggestion, but I'd really just like regular coffee. Nothing fancy." The word fancy hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt his professional composure slip slightly. Behind Elena, the line was growing, filled with customers who understood what this place represented and how to order appropriately. Her request felt like a deliberate disruption of the carefully cultivated atmosphere he'd worked to maintain. "Look," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly and lowering his voice in what he probably thought was a helpful gesture. "I'm not sure you understand what kind of establishment this is. We're not really a place for basic coffee orders. There's a chain shop about 3 blocks down that might be more your speed." The conversation had attracted subtle attention from nearby customers, some of whom had paused their phone conversations to listen. Elena noticed their interest but gave no indication that the growing audience affected her in any way. Her posture remained relaxed, her expression patient, as if she had all the time in the world to resolve this simple misunderstanding. "I understand perfectly where I am," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying just enough firmness to suggest that Marcus might want to reconsider his approach. "I'd like to order coffee from your establishment, please." Marcus straightened, his customer service mask slipping further as frustration replaced professionalism. The morning rush was backing up behind this woman who clearly didn't belong here, and her insistence on something so basic felt like a personal affront to everything he'd built his reputation on. "Fine," he said, his tone now openly dismissive. "1 medium drip coffee, but I have to tell you, it's probably not going to meet your expectations. We brew our drip coffee for people who actually appreciate quality, not just caffeine." As Marcus turned toward the forgotten drip coffee station, Elena's hand moved almost unconsciously to the worn leather purse at her side. Inside, beneath a small notebook and reading glasses, lay a business card holder containing cards that could resolve this situation instantly. But her fingers didn't reach for it. Instead, she waited, watching Marcus pour coffee from a thermal carafe that had clearly been sitting for longer than optimal brewing standards recommended. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built this company on the principle that every customer deserved excellent service, regardless of their order complexity or apparent economic status. The training materials she'd personally developed emphasized treating each interaction as an opportunity to create a positive experience, understanding that today's simple coffee order might belong to tomorrow's regular customer or community advocate. Marcus returned with a paper cup filled with coffee that looked as uninspired as his attitude toward serving it. He set it on the counter with unnecessary force, causing a small splash to escape the lid and stain the otherwise pristine surface. $4.50, he announced, his tone suggesting that even this modest price was more consideration than Elena's order deserved. Elena reached into her purse, her movements deliberate and unhurried. As she counted out exact change, she spoke without looking up. "You know, I've been coming to coffee shops for over 30 years. I've seen how the industry has evolved, how much more sophisticated everything has become." Marcus accepted the payment with barely concealed impatience, clearly eager to move on to more deserving customers. "Yeah, well, evolution means leaving some things behind. Simple coffee is pretty much obsolete when you can have something crafted specifically for your palate." "Interesting perspective," Elena replied, lifting the cup and taking a small sip. The coffee was bitter, over-extracted, and had the flat taste that came from sitting too long in a thermal carafe. She didn't wince or complain, simply nodded as if confirming something she'd suspected. Behind her, the next customer stepped forward with visible relief, ordering a complex macchiato variation that immediately restored Marcus's enthusiasm. Elena moved away from the counter, finding an empty table near the large windows that faced the street. From this vantage point, she could observe the entire operation while remaining unobtrusive. The coffee shop hummed with activity around her. Baristas moved efficiently between stations. Steam wands created artistic foam patterns, and customers photographed their drinks before taking first sips. Everything functioned exactly as she'd envisioned when designing the company's operational standards. Yet watching Marcus's interaction with subsequent customers, Elena noticed subtle patterns that concerned her. He was charming and knowledgeable with customers who ordered complex drinks, taking time to explain brewing methods and bean origins. His enthusiasm was genuine when discussing the nuances of different roasting profiles or the optimal temperature for extracting specific flavor notes. But when occasionally simpler orders came through, his demeanor shifted, not as dramatically as it had with Elena, but enough to suggest that his attitude toward her hadn't been an isolated incident. A woman in scrubs, clearly on break from a nearby medical facility, ordered a simple latte and received polite but perfunctory service. An older gentleman asking for black coffee with cream was served efficiently but without the educational commentary that accompanied more complex orders. The pattern was clear. Professional competence maintained but genuine engagement reserved for customers who met Marcus's standards of sophistication. Elena sipped her mediocre coffee and reflected on the delicate balance she'd tried to create. Artisan Grounds was supposed to be a place where craft and accessibility coexisted, where expertise enhanced rather than intimidated the customer experience. She'd trained her staff to be educators and guides, helping customers discover new flavors and preparation methods while respecting whatever brought them through the door. The business philosophy had grown from her own journey in coffee. She'd started as someone who simply needed caffeine to function, gradually developing a deeper appreciation for the complexity and artistry possible in coffee preparation. That evolution had happened because patient baristas had guided her learning, without making her feel ignorant or unwelcome. She'd built Artisan Grounds on the principle that everyone deserved that same opportunity for discovery. But watching Marcus, Elena realized that expertise without humility could become exclusivity. Technical skill without empathy could transform a welcoming space into something that served only those who already belonged. The very success of the training program she'd developed had created baristas capable of impressive artistry. But perhaps she hadn't emphasized strongly enough that the greatest skill was making every customer feel valued. The morning rush began to slow, and Elena noticed Marcus taking a brief break, stepping outside for fresh air. Through the window, she watched him check his phone, probably scrolling through social media or messages from friends. He looked young in the natural light, and Elena felt a familiar mixture of frustration and responsibility. Marcus represented a failure in her system, but he was also exactly the kind of passionate coffee professional she'd hoped to develop and nurture. When Marcus returned, Elena approached the counter again. The few remaining customers were absorbed in their laptops and conversations, paying little attention to another transaction. Marcus looked up with barely concealed irritation, clearly hoping his earlier dismissive service had discouraged her from returning. "Was there something wrong with the coffee?" he asked, his tone suggesting that any complaints would be both unwelcome and unwarranted. "Actually, I wanted to ask about your training program," Elena said, her voice maintaining the same patient tone she'd used throughout their earlier interaction. "How long have you been working here?" Marcus straightened slightly, his irritation tempered by what seemed like genuine curiosity about her interest in his professional development. 3 years. I started as a regular barista and worked my way up to shift supervisor. I've completed all the advanced certifications in espresso preparation and latte art." "That's impressive," Elena said, and meant it. The certification programs were rigorous, requiring both technical proficiency and deep understanding of coffee science. "You clearly know your craft. I'm curious about something, though. In your training, what did they teach you about customer service philosophy?" The question seemed to surprise Marcus, as if customer service and coffee craft were separate domains that rarely intersected in his thinking. We learned about quality standards, making sure every drink meets company specifications, customer satisfaction through excellence in preparations. Elena nodded thoughtfully. And what about customers who might not be familiar with specialty coffee? People who are just beginning to explore beyond basic coffee. Marcus's expression shifted, becoming slightly defensive. We're supposed to educate customers, help them understand what makes our coffee special. But some people aren't really interested in learning. They just want cheap, fast coffee, which isn't what we provide here. I see, Elena said quietly. And how do you determine which customers are interested in learning versus those who just want cheap, fast coffee? The question hung in the air between them, and Elena watched as Marcus processed what she was really asking. His earlier assumption about her had been based entirely on her appearance and order, not on any expressed disinterest in learning or quality. The realization was beginning to dawn on him, though he wasn't yet ready to acknowledge the implications. I guess, Marcus said slowly, you can usually tell by how they order, what they're wearing, whether they seem to understand what this place is about. Elena smiled, the expression sad rather than judgmental. 3 years ago, when I first discovered specialty coffee, I walked into a shop wearing old jeans and ordered regular coffee because I didn't know enough to order anything else. The barista spent 20 minutes teaching me about different brewing methods, let me taste samples, and helped me find something I loved. That experience changed how I thought about coffee entirely. Marcus listened, his defensive posture softening slightly as Elena continued. That barista didn't judge my appearance or my initial order. They saw someone who might be interested in learning and took the time to share their knowledge. Because of that experience, I became a regular customer, eventually spending thousands of dollars at that shop and developing a genuine passion for craft coffee. The parallel was clear, though Elena didn't state it explicitly. Marcus had missed an opportunity to create exactly the kind of transformative experience that built lasting customer relationships and genuine appreciation for coffee artistry. His expertise, applied with patience and enthusiasm, could have guided someone new into the world he was passionate about. Instead, his assumptions had closed that door before it could open. I hadn't thought about it that way, Marcus admitted, his voice quieter now, less certain. Elena reached into her purse again, this time pulling out a business card holder. Marcus watched as she selected a card and placed it gently on the counter between them. The card was simple, elegant, with the Artisan Grounds logo embossed in subtle gold. Below it, her name and title were printed in clean, understated font. Marcus picked up the card, his eyes moving from the logo to the name to the title printed beneath. His face went through a series of changes as the information processed. Confusion gave way to recognition, then to something approaching horror as the full implications of the morning's interactions became clear. Elena Rodriguez, founder and CEO, he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena nodded, her expression remaining gentle despite the gravity of the moment. I try to visit our locations regularly, usually without announcement. It helps me understand how we're actually serving our customers, versus how we think we're serving them. The coffee shop around them continued its normal operations, but for Marcus, everything had shifted. The woman he'd dismissed and condescended to wasn't just a customer he'd misjudged. She was the person who'd built the very company he'd claimed to represent. Every word he'd spoken, every assumption he'd made, every moment of unprofessional behavior had been witnessed by the one person whose opinion mattered most to his career and future. Ma'am, Marcus began, then stopped, realizing that no immediate apology could undo what had happened or change what Elena had observed. Marcus, Elena said gently, I want you to know that this conversation isn't about punishment, it's about understanding. You're clearly skilled at what you do, passionate about coffee, and capable of providing excellent service when you choose to. What concerns me is the choosing part. She gestured toward the space around them, the carefully designed environment that represented years of vision and investment. This company was built on the idea that great coffee should be accessible to everyone, that expertise should be shared generously, not hoarded as a way to exclude people. Every customer who walks through that door deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their order or appearance. Marcus nodded, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. I understand. I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong, and I failed to represent what this company stands for. You did, Elena agreed, but you also demonstrated real skill and knowledge with other customers. The question now is whether you can learn from this experience and apply that same enthusiasm and expertise to every interaction, regardless of the customer or their order. The conversation was drawing subtle attention from other staff members, who sensed that something significant was happening without understanding exactly what. Elena noticed their awareness and knew that how she handled this moment would send a message throughout the entire location about company values and expectations. I want to offer you a choice, Elena continued. You can see this as an ending, a mistake that costs you your position here, or you can see it as a beginning, an opportunity to become the kind of barista who truly embodies what Artisan Grounds represents. Someone who uses their expertise to welcome and educate rather than to judge and exclude. Marcus looked up from the business card, meeting Elena's eyes directly for the first time since their initial interaction. What he saw there wasn't anger or vindictiveness, but genuine hope that he could become better than he'd been. I'd like it to be a beginning, he said quietly. I want to do better. Elena smiled, the expression warm and encouraging. Then let's start with that drip coffee you served me. It was over-extracted and had been sitting too long. If someone ordered regular coffee from you tomorrow, how would you make sure they received the same quality experience as someone ordering your most complex creation? The question was both practical and philosophical, challenging Marcus to reconsider how he defined quality service. Over the next few minutes, they discussed proper drip coffee preparation, the importance of timing and freshness, and ways to engage customers regardless of their order complexity. Elena shared insights from her years in the industry, while Marcus demonstrated his technical knowledge, the conversation gradually transforming from confrontation into collaboration. Other staff members gradually became aware that their founder was present, word spreading quietly through the team. But rather than panic or artificial performance, Elena's presence seemed to inspire a renewed focus on the values she'd just articulated. Conversations with customers became more patient and educational, simple orders received the same attention as complex ones, and the entire atmosphere of the shop shifted toward the inclusive excellence Elena had originally envisioned. As the morning transitioned into afternoon, Elena prepared to leave. She'd accomplished more than just addressing one employee's behavior. She'd reminded an entire team about the principles that separated genuine hospitality from mere technical proficiency. Marcus approached her as she gathered her things, his demeanor completely transformed from their first encounter. Thank you, he said simply, for giving me the chance to learn from this instead of just facing consequences. Elena paused, considering her response. Marcus, building something worthwhile requires believing that people can grow and change. You have genuine talent and passion for coffee. Channel that into making every customer feel welcome, and you'll not only become a better barista, you'll help build the kind of place where everyone can discover something they love. She left him with that thought, walking out the same doors through which she'd entered hours earlier. But everything had changed, not just for Marcus, but for the entire understanding of what it meant to serve excellence with humility. The simple woman with the basic coffee order had reminded them all that true sophistication lies not in exclusion, but in the generous sharing of expertise and passion with anyone willing to receive it. As Elena drove away, she reflected on the morning's lessons. Building a company culture required constant vigilance, ongoing education, and the willingness to address problems when they arose. But it also required faith in people's capacity for growth and change. Marcus had the potential to become exactly the kind of employee she'd hoped to develop, someone whose expertise enhanced rather than intimidated the customer experience. The next morning, Marcus arrived early, spending extra time preparing fresh drip coffee and reviewing the customer service principles Elena had discussed. When the first customer of the day ordered a simple black coffee, Marcus served it with the same enthusiasm and attention he'd previously reserved for complex espresso drinks. The customer noticed the difference, commenting on the quality and asking about the beans used. That conversation led to a more adventurous order the following week, exactly the kind of customer journey Elena had envisioned when building Artisan Grounds. Word of Elena's visit and the lessons learned spread throughout the company, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of core values. The story became part of training materials, helping new employees understand that expertise without empathy was incomplete, that true professional skill included the ability to make every customer feel valued and welcome. Months later, Marcus had become one of the location's most effective educators, known for his ability to guide customers from simple orders to more complex discoveries, without ever making them feel ignorant or unwelcome. His technical skills hadn't diminished, but they were now applied with the understanding that the greatest craft lay not in creating exclusivity, but in sharing knowledge generously with anyone who showed interest. The transformation demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from punishment, but from being seen clearly by someone who chooses to believe in your potential for growth. Elena's simple coffee order had revealed more than just poor customer service. It had illuminated the difference between expertise that builds walls and expertise that builds bridges. In the end, the woman in worn jeans asking for regular coffee had taught an entire company that true sophistication lies not in complexity, but in the grace to meet people wherever they are and help them discover where they might want to go. That lesson, simple as black coffee but rich as the most complex brew, became the foundation for everything that followed.